The cuffs clicked cold against his wrists, steel against skin, his name echoing through marble corridors once built in his honor. Cameras flashed behind glass barriers as a billionaire titan was escorted through the lobby he had designed, past the portraits he'd commissioned. The world outside howled for justice. Inside, he wasn't looking at the crowd, the cops, or even the reporters. He was staring at a small girl, 6, maybe 7, clutching a worn backpack, standing by the elevator. Her eyes weren't accusing. They were confused. Her tiny hand gripped a drawing. A man in a suit holding hands with a girl, both smiling. A tear slid down her cheek. And in that moment, he broke, not because he was caught, not because the empire crumbled, but because he remembered what he built it for. A voice whispered through the chaos, he built an empire, but he couldn't save her. He hadn't spoken a word, not through the arrest, not during the media blitz, not even when his attorneys begged him to explain. But inside the holding cell, time slowed. He wasn't thinking about stocks or board members or offshore assets. He thought only of her voice, her laughter, the way she used to spin when excited. The last time she'd hugged him, it was because he promised to be there. He hadn't made it. Not to the recital, not to the surgery, not even to say goodbye. I built this, he had once told the board, so my daughter never has to ask for permission. But now, behind a steel door and bulletproof glass, permission is all he has. Permission to call. Permission to hope she'll answer. The media ran wild, empire of deceit, from boardroom to cell block, CEO or criminal. The headlines screamed louder than the facts. Protesters gathered outside the building, some holding signs with her face, others shouting about justice. But none of them knew the truth. It wasn't fraud or manipulation that undid him. It was a promise broken too many times. She had trusted him, more than shareholders, more than anyone. And trust, once fractured, doesn't always shatter, it erodes. She waited for you, her aunt had whispered through the phone. Till the very end. In another part of the city, untouched by glass towers and financial networks, her old room remains untouched. A faded ballerina lamp glows softly beside a dusty bookshelf. On the wall, a drawing tacked in place, the same one she carried in the lobby. Her mother hadn't removed it. Couldn't. Beneath it, a letter. Unsent. Addressed to him. She never stopped believing he might return. That he'd walk through the door and finally put her first. But life doesn't give clean endings. Only moments we either seize or miss. The voiceover returns, low, deliberate. He built an empire, but he couldn't save her. The screen fades to black, but the final image lingers. Not the scandal, not the headlines, but her. Standing alone. Drawing in hand. The silence is louder than the arrest. The true story hasn't begun yet, but the heartbreak already has. No names. No explanations. Just the echo of a promise not kept. Long before press conferences and quarterly earnings, he was just a boy in a faded shirt, sitting on a peeling wooden step outside a factory in Karachi. His mother's voice echoed from inside as she pleaded for work. Again. He clutched a math workbook too advanced for his age, trying to focus through the ache in his stomach and the shame in his chest. A security guard muttered, "They're not hiring beggars." He didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He just wrote faster, as if solving equations might solve everything. In that moment, he made a vow. Never again. Never again would he watch someone he loved beg. Never again would he feel powerless. The world saw a young genius rise. But the foundation of his empire? A boy's silent rage at watching his mother be turned away. He was always the quiet one in class, not because he didn't know the answers, but because he didn't want to be noticed. He already stood out. Wrong clothes, no lunchbox, never invited. But when the teacher scrawled a brutal calculus problem on the board, he rose. Not for glory. For escape. Each number, each function, each solution, was a rung out of the life he hated. After solving it flawlessly, he sat down to silence. Then came the whisper from a classmate. "That's the factory kid." The label stung. But it also lit the match. If that's who he was to them, he'd burn through expectations and rewrite his name. Not as factory kid, but as the man no one could ignore. At night, while other children slept, he would sneak into the library annex behind the school, a place no one cared to guard because no one cared to read. By flashlight he devoured everything: engineering blueprints, business case studies, startup biographies. Pages became fuel. Knowledge became armor. He didn't want riches. He wanted control, of time, of fate, of dignity. His mother, unaware, thought he was out with friends. He didn't have any. Just ideas, dreams, and equations. "You'll make us proud," she once whispered in the dark, folding his laundry by candlelight. He didn't answer. But in his mind, he already had. The acceptance letter came on a Thursday. A full scholarship to an elite tech institute in Singapore. He held it with trembling fingers, unsure whether to cry or run. His mother wept, silent tears of pride and pain. "Go," she said, "and never look back." But he did look back. At the small kitchen, the cracked mirror, the single photograph of her smiling beside a younger version of him. And he promised, aloud this time, that he would return with more than just success. He would return with power. Enough to change everything. Enough to rewrite what the world believed poor boys could do. Enough to make her sacrifices mean something. At the airport he didn't cry. Not even when she hugged him so tightly it hurt. He just kept repeating her final words in his mind. "Never let them make you feel small again." The plane roared to life, climbing above the clouds, and with it, so did he. Into boardrooms. Into brilliance. Into a world so far removed from where he began, he sometimes doubted it was real. But he never erased the memory of that child on the stoop. That boy still walked beside him, in silence. Watching. Reminding. He built his legacy not on ambition, but on ache. Not on ego, but on a mother's belief. And that belief, unspoken, is what made him unstoppable. Singapore was a blur of neon and ambition. While others partied, he studied. While others networked, he built. His fingers bled from late-night soldering labs, his mind buzzed with code, numbers, and strategy. A professor once told him, "You don't sleep, do you?" He didn't answer. He couldn't afford to. In rented co-working spaces, he wrote algorithms that predicted consumer behavior. By graduation he had a prototype, a pitch, and a passport full of rejection stamps. Investors called it too ambitious. He called it inevitable. And finally one said, yes. 50,000. Enough to launch. He didn't celebrate. Just sat quietly, staring at the skyline, whispering, "This is for her." The first product launch was chaos. Servers crashed. Orders backlogged. A competitor mocked him publicly. But he didn't sleep. For 72 hours he and 2 interns, one doubling as a delivery driver, fixed, coded, shipped. When the first major client renewed, he didn't smile. He just whispered. His friends stopped calling. Family dinners became excuses. Birthday reminders went ignored. But the graphs kept climbing. Revenue. Traffic. Market share. He stared at dashboards like they were family portraits. Each peak a silent validation that the sacrifices, birthdays, friendships, love, weren't for nothing. But sometimes, in rare quiet moments he wondered, what's the cost of climbing if no one's at the top with you? Success brought silence. As the company expanded, the air around him grew thinner. Meetings replaced conversations. Numbers replaced names. Investors wanted more. Always more. "You're a machine," one board member said. And he became one. 12-hour days became 18. He stopped calling home. His mother's voice had become too soft, too distant, like a memory. He told himself he'd make time next quarter. Then the news came. She was gone. No final call. No goodbye. Just silence. And for the first time in years, he paused. In a sterile boardroom, surrounded by suits and spreadsheets, he cried. Quietly. Alone. The boy who built everything hadn't built enough time. He threw himself deeper into the company. If he couldn't be a son, he'd be a legend. He expanded into 3 continents. Partnered with governments. Became the face of innovation. But he also became invisible to himself. Awards stacked up, but they felt like tombstones. One night, during a press gala, he was handed another trophy. Innovator of the Year. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered. And in that moment, under spotlights and champagne, he saw her face in the crowd. Not really there, just memory. Her expression wasn't proud. It was tired. Distant. And he realized he had become everything they admired. But not the man she raised. Late one night, long after the last assistant had left, he wandered through the office alone. Screens glowed. Keyboards slept. And on a hallway wall, he noticed an old photo. Him and his daughter, when she was barely 2. He had forgotten it existed. She had drawn on the back. "Come home soon, Baba." The handwriting was crooked. The message was not. He sat in the dark, holding the frame like it was made of glass, like time might shatter in his hands. The man who had conquered markets, silenced competitors, and bent headlines now stared at a child's drawing, and finally felt small. It was the one thing he hadn't built. A life with her. It started with a routine audit. Just numbers. Just paperwork. But something didn't add up. Offshore movements that hadn't been approved. He brushed it off at first, until one name came up repeatedly. Rajan Mehta. His CFO, Vinay. His oldest friend. The man who sat beside him in every board meeting. The man who once slept on his dorm floor, back when they dreamed together. The man he trusted with everything. But now, Mehta wasn't answering calls. Files were encrypted. And beneath layers of shell companies, something darker festered. Not a mistake. A betrayal. One that went back years. And all this time, while he'd been building his empire, someone had been quietly siphoning it away. Not just money, his legacy. He confronted Rajan in the only place that still felt sacred, the innovation lab. The very room where they'd first built the company's engine. It was supposed to be silent. But Rajan was already there. Waiting. No excuses. No denials. Just a single sentence. You were too busy saving the world to notice you lost it. Silence hung like a blade. The betrayal wasn't in what Rajan had done. It was in how easily he'd done it, knowing the CEO would never look. "I needed control," Rajan said. "You had all of it." That night, 2 men who once shared ramen and dreams walked out as strangers. Only one still had the company. But neither had what they started with. The news hit like a thunderclap. Investigations. Shareholder panic. Stock freefall. Every headline screamed betrayal, but no one knew the full story. Internal memos leak. Whispers of embezzlement turned into full-on scandal. He stood in front of the press, cameras clicking like gunfire. "I was blind," he said, voice hollow, "but I take full responsibility. Not because he was guilty, but because he couldn't let the company bleed. If he didn't absorb the fall, the empire would die. And with it, her legacy." The same little girl who once drew his face on her math notebook and called him Super Baba. He stepped down that day. Not defeated, but broken. He returned home. But it didn't feel like home. His penthouse, once filled with light, felt like a mausoleum. Awards lined the walls like silent judges. His daughter's room was untouched. A forgotten sweater on the bed. School project still pinned above the desk. In the corner, her old tablet blinked, an unsent video message. He played it. Her voice, small and bright. I miss you, Baba. Are you coming this week? I kept the seat for you. She held up a chair beside her, empty, smiling. The screen froze on her face mid-laugh. He dropped to his knees. Not from shame. From regret. Because this was the moment he realized he hadn't lost his company. He'd lost her. The next morning, he walked into the office one last time. Not as CEO. Just a man with a letter in his pocket. A resignation. Not from the board, but from the illusion of control. As he stepped into the elevator, staff turned away, unsure whether to offer sympathy or distance. But one voice broke the silence. A janitor, the same one who'd seen him rise from all-nighters and microwave meals, said, "She'd still be proud of you, sir." That moment didn't fix anything, but it reminded him that impact wasn't only measured in numbers. Sometimes it lived in people you didn't even notice. And perhaps he still had time to be something more than the title he lost. He hadn't seen her in 3 years. Not since the funeral. Not since the calls went unanswered. But now, standing outside her new school, he waited like a stranger. She stepped out of class, taller now, face sharper, but those eyes, still hers. She froze when she saw him. He didn't speak, just handed her the letter. "I stepped down," he finally said, voice trembling. "I thought I was building this for you, but I missed the only thing that mattered, you." She didn't hug him, didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. She read the letter, slowly, and when she was done, she whispered, "I saved you a seat, you just never showed up." Then she walked past him, only to pause a few feet ahead. "Are you coming now?" They sat on a park bench in near silence. She sipped juice, he held his breath. He wanted to talk about the empire, the fall, the lessons, but she asked only one question: why weren't you there? And this time he didn't give excuses. No market strategy. No product launch story. Just the truth. "I was scared that I'd never be enough for you." She looked at him, unblinking. "I didn't want enough, I just wanted you." That broke him. Not because it hurt, but because it was simple. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a founder or a fraud. He felt like a father trying to earn his place, not in the world, but in her life. That evening she showed him her world, her drawings, her science projects, her dreams. He was a guest in a life he should have helped build. But he listened. Truly listened. When she showed him a sketch of a robot that helps people talk when they're sad, he laughed, then cried. "You're going to do things I never could," he whispered. She looked up. "Only if you come to my expo next week." He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there, front row. No assistants. No boardrooms. Just him." She nodded, not fully trusting, but hoping. And hope, he realized, was something he hadn't earned in years. Until now. He walked into the old boardroom one last time, not for power, but to give it away. His former executives sat in silence as he placed a sealed folder on the table. "I'm donating my remaining shares," he said. "Half to STEM education for girls, half to mental health access for startup founders." The room buzzed in disbelief. This company wasn't just built on code, he said. It was built on wounds, mine, and hers. But it's time someone else writes the next chapter. As he walked out, he didn't look back. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of what came after legacy. Because now he had something to return to. The night before the expo, he stayed up, helping her cut foam boards and fix wiring. There was no assistant. No media. Just 2 hands rediscovering purpose through scissors, glue, and a child's ambition. As she tested her robot one final time, it glitched, and she burst into tears. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her. "Try again," he whispered. "I'll be right here." And this time he was. When the robot blinked to life, her face lit up. She hugged him, tight. No cameras captured it. No headlines recorded it. But in that moment, the man once called visionary became something far greater. present. The auditorium buzzed with chatter and homemade science experiments, each folding chairs, handwritten signs, glittery poster boards. And in the front row he sat, no phone, no entourage. Just a man in jeans and a hoodie, eyes locked on his daughter. When she walked on stage, she stumbled briefly, then caught his gaze. He gave a small nod, steady, proud. She began to speak, and though her voice trembled, her words landed. This robot doesn't fix people, but it listens, like my dad did for the first time. Gasps, then claps. He felt tears sting his eyes, not from shame, but from healing. Because for once, he wasn't watching the future unfold from behind a glass wall. He was in it. Later that night, they walked home beneath the streetlights. She carried the robot. He carried her backpack. No words were needed. Just shared silence and soft smiles. They passed a playground, empty, glowing under amber lamps. "One round?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. Moments later, she raced down the slide as he waited at the bottom, arms out. Laughter echoed. Joy, unfiltered and loud. He didn't capture it on camera. He lived it. And as she wrapped her arms around him, he thought, empires crumble, markets shift, names fade, but this was real. And if the rest of his life was just catching her at the bottom of the slide, that would be enough. He started volunteering, quietly, anonymously, teaching code at underfunded schools, listening to founders on the edge of burnout. No cameras, no PR team, just presence. The man who once chased scale now chased stillness. One day, after class, a student asked, "Weren't you the guy on TV?" He smiled. "Used to be." The student paused. "You're better now." He didn't reply, just nodded, because for the first time he believed it too. Not because he had less, but because he was more awake, more present, more human. He wasn't fixing the world anymore. He was finally part of it. Her drawing now hung framed on his wall, no longer buried in documents. Two figures holding hands beneath a sky full of stars. He looked at it every morning before making breakfast, before walking her to school, before starting work again, not at a firm, but at a non-profit incubator for parent-led innovation. His days were full, but different. Not racing, just flowing. And some nights when she asked about the past, he answered honestly, "I made mistakes." She always nodded like she already knew. But one night she added softly, "But you're here now. And that's what counts." Redemption, he realized, doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it whispers in the hallway at bedtime. He stood on a quiet rooftop, looking out at the skyline he once ruled. The towers were still there. The headlines had moved on. The world didn't pause. But his world had changed entirely. Behind him she called, "Baba, we're gonna be late." He turned, smiling, stepping back into the stairwell. No limo. No corner office. Just a breakfast talk at her school. But that was the summit now. Not the empire he built, but the trust he rebuilt. Not the millions he lost, but the one life he reclaimed. The skyline blurred behind him as the door closed. Not a retreat, but a return. To the only future that ever mattered. The classroom was packed with parents. Folding chairs creaked, phones buzzed, and coffee steamed from paper cups. But he wasn't distracted. He sat in the back row, eyes steady, heart full. On stage his daughter stepped forward, not to perform, but to speak. "We were asked to talk about someone who inspires us," she said, voice strong. "Mine used to be a stranger, someone busy, far away. But now, he walks me to school." The audience chuckled, softly. He didn't move, didn't smile. He just breathed, slowly, deeply. Because for once the applause wasn't for what he built. It was for who he became. After the event, she tugged his sleeve. "Want to see something?" she asked. They ducked into a quiet hallway, where she opened a notebook, its pages filled with sketches, stories, questions. But one page stood out. A design for a new kind of school, solar-powered, free for everyone, built like playgrounds. "I think you could help me build it," she said, eyes wide. He stared at the drawing. He saw lines, angles, vision, but mostly he saw her. And in her, himself. "I won't miss a minute," he promised. Not another game. Not another drawing. Not another dream. She didn't reply. She just handed him the notebook and walked ahead. Trust, earned, not assumed. Back at home, he hung her notebook beside the old framed drawing. One for the past. One for the future. They stood side by side, father and daughter, staring at the wall like it was a museum of moments. "Think we can do it?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "If we build it together." No logo. No board. Just a bond. Stronger than revenue. Deeper than brand equity. In that room, with the hum of dinner cooking and music low in the background, he felt something unfamiliar: peace. Not the kind born of success, but the kind that grows in the silence after apology, and in the choice to stay. In a modest, sunlit co-working space months later, they hosted their first info session. No marble floors. No press. Just parents, children, and a chalkboard that read, "Build with heart." He didn't speak much. She led. Confident, smiling. When someone asked if she was his daughter, he corrected them. "I'm her father." And in that flip, in that simple reversal, the weight of years collapsed. He had once tried to save her with empires. But now she was saving him. With presence, with purpose, with the gentle power of being seen, not as a symbol, but as a man becoming whole. In the final scene, we return to the elevator. But this time it's different. A child walks in, same age, same wide eyes, carrying a notebook full of ideas. The doors open to a new kind of building. No towers. Just light. Just space. Just hope. A voice, calm, clear, whispers, "He left the company." But never left her. And as the screen fades to black, we see her hand reach out. Not for power, not for legacy, but for his. Together. Because in the end, she didn't just teach him how to lead. She taught him how to be.